Joining me now from Southern California, former policy analyst in the Reagan White House, political commentator, filmmaker, and author of the new book, The Big Lie, Exposing the Nazi Roots of the American Left, Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh, timing is everything, as they say in life, and your book comes out right during all this, what happened in Charlottesville. And your book essentially outlines the genesis for hate in this country, the Nazi roots coming from not the right, the left.
Fascism and Nazism have always been on the left. The founder of fascism, Mussolini, was a Marxist. Hitler was the head of a party that was called the National Socialist German Workers' Party. And fascism is the ideology of the centralized state. It was recognized to be so by the fascists. It was also recognized to be so by American progressives. FDR, the progressive icon, was a big fan of Mussolini. He actually sent members of his brain trust to fascist Italy. He regarded fascism as more progressive than the New Deal. He wanted to bring fascist ideas to America. Mussolini, for his part, was a big fan of FDR. So what I'm getting at here is that this is the actual history of fascism. And in a kind of weird twist, the left now is trying to construct a narrative in which the fascists are somehow right-wing. But that's part of the big lie. That's why the book, I think, is appropriately titled The Big Lie. The big lie is the idea that fascism and Nazism are on the right. They're not.
And they're using the guise of fascism to attack our culture and our history from the civil wars. And I've said on this program many times that Robert E. Lee is no less a veteran of this country than the Tuskegee Airmen. But Dinesh, I want to show you a little clip we put together here. What is the difference between what they did in North Carolina and tearing down that war memorial, that statue, and what the Islamic State has been doing in the Middle East? Roll tape. All right, I would submit that this is what fascists do. They're cut out of the same cloth. This is hate.
The political writer Christopher Hitchens called this Islamofascism, and it sure is fascist tactics. Now, what's remarkable is that the old fascists, the brown shirts in Nazi Germany, Mussolini's black shirts, they were willing to call themselves fascists. The remarkable thing is today's fascists on the left call themselves anti-fascists. And yet, if you look at them, they dress like fascists, they talk like fascists, they engage in intimidation, threats, and violence. You mentioned Robert E. Lee. Now, what's very interesting is that the left tries to blame slavery entirely on the South. Right. Robert E. Lee was offered the command by Abraham Lincoln of the Union Army. Robert E. Lee was opposed both to slavery and to secession. So isn't it bizarre that a man opposed to slavery and secession should become, for the left, a symbol of slavery and secession?
And you talk about that extensively in the book. You talk about the link between slavery and the Democrat Party. I want to get to that in a second, but first a tweet from the President of the United States, because you talk about Donald Trump in your book extensively. This tweet from the president, after he talked about Charlottesville, made additional remarks on Charlottesville and realized once again that the fake news media will never be satisfied, truly bad people. That is because they'll never be happy, because it's not about the truth. It's, as you point out in your book, trying to paint people like Donald Trump as a fascist.
They're trying to pin the fascist tail on the Republican elephant when it belongs squarely on the Democratic donkey. They try to equate Trump with Hitler. They say, well, Trump has been making racist attacks on immigrants. Wait a minute. The thing about Trump is that he's distinguishing between the legal and the illegal immigrant. This is not a racial distinction at all. In fact, the vast majority of immigrants who come to America now, legal immigrants, are non-white. They come from Asia, from Africa, from South America. Trump has never said that he wants to whiten American immigration, that he wants more people to come from Australia and Canada and fewer to come from, say, India or Barbados. So the whole idea that Trump is trying to make some sort of a racial agenda, completely false.
Okay, I want to go to page 130 of your book where you talk about the link between fascism, Nazism, and the Democrats in this country. This is under the chapter titled The Original Racists. Quote, in sheer volume and vehemence, the racism of the Democrats and progressives outdistanced not only Italian fascist racism, which was marginal, but also German anti-Semitism. Only the anti-Semitism of the Nazi era matches the racism of the Democrats. The bottom line is, you point out in this book, as you did in your prior movie, that the Democrat Party is the party of slavery and segregation, etc.
Yeah, consider the Ku Klux Klan. You know, the left is now focusing on a handful of ragtag Ku Klux Klansmen. Now, the Klan today could barely mobilize a few dozen guys to march. If the Klan marches anywhere in the country now, there will be protesters who outnumber the Klan 10 to 1. But the Klan was an organization that had real power. In the 1920s, it had 3 to 5 million members. At that time, according to the progressive historian Eric Foner, the Klan was, quote, the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party. In other words, the Klan was to the Democrats exactly what the brown shirts were to the Nazis, an extension of a political party. In 1925, I believe it was, the Klan marched 50,000 people in white hoods down Fifth Avenue in New York City. And where were they going? To the Democratic National Convention. Many of them were delegates.
That's right. They called it the Klan.
The Klan bake, exactly.
Unfortunately. You also talk about the politics of intimidation, which really the left has mastered, again, under the guise of fighting fascism with fascism. And wouldn't you agree that Barack Obama really was the intimidator in chief during his 8 years in the White House?
Well, I had personal experience of this in which Obama's Justice Department and it's unleashed a volley of FBI agents and a whole bunch of guys. You feel the full power of the federal government going after you. Why? Because I made a movie critical of Obama. So with Obama, we saw a nasty turn in Democratic politics in which the arms of the state, the FBI, the CIA, the Justice Department, are mobilized against the political opposition. If that's not fascism, I don't know what is.
Mainstream media, Media Matters, and George Soros, they're all joining together to try and not only take down Donald Trump, but to take us away from our representative republic. And this is a war that is ongoing. And so it's going to take people like you and folks on this program, and I would consider the alternative media, to try and offer the American people the alternative, which would be the truth.
A few years ago, one of the heads of the Republican National Committee, a guy named Ken Melman, was going to black churches apologizing for the racist history of the Republican Party. Now, think of how stupid this guy is. There is no racist history of the Republican Party. The Republican Party is the party of emancipation, of fighting Jim Crow, of fighting segregation, shutting down the Klan, enabling the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But this poor dude had embraced the big lie. He embraced the lie of the left, and he was, in a sense, acting it out. So it's important for us to be equipped with knowledge, with the truth, so we are able to fight back against this effort to shame us, put us up against the wall. The left is actually the party of fascism, always was, still is.